Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session with your host,
Michael Rearden.
Let's just get straight into it, right? Let's get straight into your work. Let's get straight into talking about the reason why you're here, talking about your book, and we're going to definitely have some fun conversation on mindset, and then especially into your work, talking about the Mindful Photography Field Guide. What made you want to write this article or this guide or this book for people?
Well, it's born out of experience. So much of us who are in this field of helping others, we're effective at helping other people because of our lived experience. We've been through it. It's one of the things that I love about this whole coaching paradigm versus the old, mental health counselor, psychiatry, psychology, all this, because it just implies lived experience and a vulnerability that you don't get in that clinical professional world. It's like in a coaching arrangement, you're going to usually share some of your personal experience, and that's just not something that I experienced in that whole mental health world. But the book was born out of a particular experience and era when I was there in Austin, actually, and I can tell you more about that.
Yeah, so let's just get into the whole aspect of mental health today, because I think that's an important aspect to our conversation today, because you said it was different for you than going to see a therapist or psychologist. More people are gravitating toward life coaches and not trying to sit into a office where they just talk about their emotions and their feelings all the time. And I know there was a celebrity, I forget his name, but he's a comedian. He has a podcast also. And he was talking about how he went to therapy for 2 years. And basically, after the fact he did therapy for 2 years, he was like, what's the point of me coming here? It's like, I'm going to come here and I'm going to bitch and I'm going to moan about my problems. And it's like nothing's being done. Like, I don't feel good after me telling you what's wrong in my life. Like, I feel better going out and finding the solutions and solving that. People today, especially the newer generation that are coming up and stepping into adulthood, they want results. They want action. They don't want so much of, like, it would be nice to dream and hope. They're doers. And so we're living in a world of doers today. And many people are only talkers anymore. They want to do also. So, what's your philosophy on the difference in the dynamic of what's happening in the world today?
It's such a great topic. And I know that when we're finished with this podcast, that I'm going to know so much more about, your vision of mindset. And I listened to some of your podcasts, of course, and I heard a conversation about, some nuance about that and calling it this or that, and mindset doesn't work and this does work or whatever. And all of that is so, it's kind of comical to me when we try to put all of these names and labels on things that really lead to, if we're really doing the work and if we really go deep, it leads to the same thing. It kind of leads to me being okay with the way things are right here and now. And if not totally okay with it, to be able to experience it and to be able to sit with that, both metaphorically and physically. Like I remember this was about 10 years ago when I went through a really brutal state of depression and anxiety. And I came across this methodology called dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. It was created in the 70s by a woman named Marsha Linehan, and for people who struggled and were not effectively receiving care. Medication didn't work, typical psychiatric protocols didn't work and talk therapy didn't work. But what was discovered was that action does work. And DBT and that whole world of dialectics, it's basically, I think it's a Greco-Roman kind of term, two things being 100% true at the same time. And I used to operate, I think when we're really struggling emotionally, we really operate in that black and white mode, man. It's either got to be this or that. And in fact, you you really grab onto that and want to lean more onto that because you're so desperate for a black and white solution. I want to feel better, So let me take some medication or some drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever to make me feel better versus being able to sit with those tough emotions. And so dialectics, I learned that I could radically accept the conditions in my life and the mindset and the struggles that I was having, radically accept that as true. But at the same time, I'm able to take opposite to emotion action to act positively. So to me, and in the whole spiritual world, and we can get so caught up in just talking about God and the world of the spirit, and they're all opinions and ideas and identifications. But I mean, the truly sitting with the presence of God is a really different experience. And so the book is partly kind of born out of my frustration with my Christian experience up until that time and not receiving the help that I needed. And it's not like the church, it wasn't like a problem with the Bible or the problem with the church. The quote problem was me. But just all of the talk, kind of that world and memorizing scripture and saying affirmations and going to therapists and stuff, it still wasn't a substitute for me being able to sit with those challenging emotions. And I was blessed enough while I was in Austin to discover this church there were Christians. It was a Christian church, but there were Christians who meditated. And I learned about this Trappist monk named Father Thomas Keating. He and some other Trappist monks in the 70s developed something called centering prayer. And it's sort of the structure of it is kind of similar to transcendental meditation. These people were seeing people being influenced in the 60s and 70s by all these Eastern teachings and meditation and the Beatles and, think of that. And they wanted a Christian alternative. So hence centering prayer. And actually the St. Benedict's monastery that he was the head of is right up in this valley. I live in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and Aspen's at one end of the valley and Glenwood Springs is at the other. So this monastery that is up valley here. So that gave me the experience of setting a timer, setting it aside, notifications off, sit, close my eyes, and let it rip, man. I mean, I can try while I'm in meditation, my mind, I catch myself like it'll be like 8 minutes into it where I'll constantly go, oh yeah, because my mind's just going. But whether you're slipping into the gap in meditation, or whether you've just got monkey mind the whole 20 minutes, the ability for me to sit with that, no matter how those emotions raged, was a total game changer for me. We get so afraid of our emotions and the depression and anxiety. It's so scary because you're truly losing control of yourself. And then that we end up finding out that's the whole secret to peace, is losing control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember when I was probably early 20s in college, and it was interesting, learning meditation for the first time, or just like starting to practice meditation. Because when you start meditation, when you start, being more mindful, it is not easy. As you said, you have the monkey mind, your mind is doing all of these other things besides being present in the moment, right? Just kind of having a blank mind. And it was challenging to begin, as I said. And I remember, just having some friends begin with me too. And they would always, 5-15 minute session, whatever we did, coming out saying, I did terrible. And it's not so much about doing good or bad that day. It's about understanding where you are. And that is all aspects of life. Because today you can be in poverty. You can be struggling to pay the bills, but it doesn't mean that has to be your circumstance later on in life. You get to make that choice. And for someone who allows their brain to kind of run amok, that's a choice. I understand there's so many outside stimulus and there's so much stimulus happening, especially with our technologies, our phones, what's happening in the world. It's easy to get lost. And, for us to focus a bit more on the things that matter, we can appreciate what we have rather than, thinking about the things that we would like. Because when people come in, they ask me like, hey, Michael, I'm looking for a mindset shift. I'm looking for more fulfillment. And I ask them the most simple, basic question. Well, what do you want? And the way I say it, I guess, is like, I guess they were never asked that question their whole entire life. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I want. Right. Sure. They want all the things that they were told. They want maybe a big house. They want a car. They want maybe a family. They want money. They want like the things that maybe might give them some meaning. But then for the people who have done that, they have the house, they have the car, they have the money, and they're at this point where they did everything that they were told that would make them feel fulfilled or happy or have some sense of purpose and meaning in life. They're empty. They're like a blank canvas. Yet we are all artists, and we have to understand that we are all individuals and we are all unique. I believe at the time we were born, there's 500 different like neurological pathways already um, um, there. As soon as we come out, it's like, well, where did these come from? Well, it could have happened when we're in the womb, hearing different tones, the mom's voice, the bone conductiveness from the mom, maybe the dad's there talking. So there's so much happening. And that's why you have different personalities. I don't know if you have any children or if you worked with children. They're all unique. And it's amazing because even when I was in schools and I was working, and whether I worked in just regular elementary, middle school, high school, everyone has their own personalities. Some going to be similar to parents. But what I found to be the most unique is how we are going to label a child. If we label them a misfit, you are not appropriate for your age, they act accordingly. So if we give them something of, well, you're doing a really good job and keep up the good work and, keep on challenging, they do better. And our system today is not only about, making sure this child is the best child for the world. It's kind of like, well, let's just kind of make it a conveyor belt. And it's almost like a manufacturing plant where it's like, well, whatever you get, whatever happens, it's almost like you drop your gum on the floor and when you pick it up and you have a bunch of stuff stuck to it. Where we have to understand, are we going to do the work to clean if someone gets hurt, someone gets belittled, someone is given limits? And, one of the reasons why I started coaching and teaching is because I saw the limits so readily. There's so many adults today living within their limits. So they feel stuck because they are in that box of themselves. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you today is about tools to get out of that box, tools to get out of how you might be thinking and feeling. Because you said, I believe around 10 years ago, you went through it, right? You went through a bad moment in your life, but you today can talk about it. You today can be a testament that you got out of it. And there are so many people today living in that dark spot. So what are some tools that you can share with us that would help people get out of that?
Right on. Well, first thing I want to say is that it's impossible for me to talk about my recovery and my health and me getting out of that prison that I was in without talking about my faith. So y'all are going to hear, references to scripture and whatnot, but truly the heart of my book is I'm open in the front and throughout about my faith. And I use some of that language, but I'm emphatic about in the book that these are practices that accentuate any belief system. And we all have a belief system. We are all we're spiritual, religious, belief system, whatever. We all have that. I mean, we're, like you said, the gum, I love that. We're calico cats of religion. And so these are meant to accentuate that. And that was a huge part of the book. I want it to be really inclusive in that sense. So whenever you hear me talk about, let's say Paul says God works all things together for our good, those of us that have really suffered and then are out there helping other people through it, perfect example. God worked that together for our good and the good of others too. So I love the idea of mindset because to me, mindset it's something that I have control over. And that's the intentionality of it. Mental health doesn't just come through osmosis. It comes through hard work. And the very beginning of that hard work for me had to be everything that I'm saying, by the way, these are my opinions and my experiences, okay? So a lot of it's going to involve the mental health profession. So this is my experience, and please, folks listening, let you find your own truth. But in that world, I found 10 years ago, it's not like I just woke up and, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. This is terrible. I've had this struggle for a lifetime. I was born a highly sensitive child, and I've always been so empathic and sensitive to things around me. And then time goes on and I start to struggle, and I struggle with the world around me, and depression and whatnot. And it got worse and worse in my 20s. And then came the first experience going to seeing a psychiatrist, and then getting put on medication. And then over and over counseling, and hey, what's the problem? Well, we better diagnose and put a label on the problem so we can fix the problem. That's, if my refrigerator goes out, I'm going to call someone, hey, fix my refrigerator. There's a problem with the compressor or whatever. So over all of these years, I found myself getting more and more labels on me, like I was carrying around this backpack of labels. Is it major depressive disorder or anxiety disorder or borderline personality disorder or OCD or whatever? And my God, the next thing you know, you're impossible to fix. You've got so many labels on you, and your whole identity becomes these labels. And so how can I go out in the world and be my very best in business, as an entrepreneur, as a friend, as a husband, as a whatever, if I'm broken with an illness, that I have been labeled these illnesses? How could I ever climb my way out of that? So for me, in my journey of getting out of that psychiatric industrial complex and all of the affirmation, talk about affirmations. I'm sick. I am depressed. I need medication. I need to see a talk about mindset. But that's the solution. You got to identify the problem unless you know. And I think that what you described earlier, the gentleman that was talking to you, was what he was experiencing was that echo chamber that happens in typical counseling. And that doesn't, I have a life coach who I work with, and it's action. When I get on our weekly calls, you bet, like the first 20 minutes is me just coughing it up, I'm just spilling it. And a lot of times it comes with tears and frustrations and whatever, but then it's, okay, let's process this and move forward. The obstacle is the way. The mountain that's the way. The problem is the way, but it's not running from the problem. It's running directly at it and breaking the myth that there's fear there. I think that helped me a lot. So that idea of shedding the labels, I think, has to be the first part in that process. I mean, in step paradigm, step one, admit you're powerless over, say, alcohol, and that your life has become unmanageable. There has to be that brokenness, I think, and that admission of unmanageability. Like, my gosh, I can't go on like this. What is my life going to be like if I'm still fighting these demons around every corner? And so that mindset shift, I was going through it just 30 minutes ago, Michael. I mean, here I am. Here comes the nervousness. I'm getting on a podcast. I get on my knees and I pray and I say some affirmations and I feel that fear. And man, I do it anyway, like the book. I mean, that's the best life paradigm. Feel the fear and do it anyway. The fear is a natural occurring emotion, but where it becomes spiritual and I think demonic is when that fear gets a grip on us and it becomes inescapable. And part of that is those labels. So that would be the first step.
I've been on a couple of podcasts, like being the guest. And then, of course, I have a lot of episodes of my podcast. And you get used to being in front of the camera, speaking to people. And then as you're a guest, is a lower level of public speaking in front of a bigger crowd. And I'll give you a tip for anyone who is getting into podcasting anyone who's going to be a guest or who's going to be doing a workshop, keynote speech, whatever it be, is the reason why you might feel a little nervous is, of course, the unexpected. But then it's because the body is actually filling with adrenaline. It's because the body's like, okay, here we go. Well, I don't know what to expect, right? So the body's naturally doing that. So you have to dissipate some of that adrenaline. The best way to do it is to do some squats really quick, some push-ups, just do like 15, 20 push-ups or something like that. And it helps get rid of some of that adrenaline. So then when you're coming in, you're more calm, you're more focused. And then you can pay attention a lot more clearly because you're not so much worried about, am I going to make a mistake? Are they going to like me? Who cares if they like you? Like you're going in as your true authentic self. Now, if you're going to be fake, then, that's a different story. But most of the guests that I come on are not coming on just to be fake, and then if you are fake, I probably won't air the podcast. So we are going in to share our experiences, because in life, it's not only about my experience. It's not only about the books that I read. Everyone has their own view. Everyone has their own perception. And I always say, like, there's, little flakes of gold. There's little nuggets. And every podcast you listen to, there's one there. Right? It could be small and minute, from the 30-minute podcast or an hour podcast. It might be 10 seconds, but that 10 seconds can change your life. And the 10 seconds can not only be about advice, it could be about what you do. 10 seconds in the morning, you wake up, you don't hit the snooze button, right? You have a choice to drive into a drive-through to get some fast food, or to go into a grocery store and to buy some food so you can cook and prepare your own food. That's a 10-second decision, right? Maybe even less. It could be 1 second. It could be split decisions that can truly help transform your life. But yet many people, they just kind of, operate on autopilot. They are so used to their routines. And that's what happens. And what happened for me, if you go to any schooling, right? It doesn't matter if you go to public, private, doesn't matter the school, right? You are going to develop an identity. And that identity is typically going to come with an ego later on, especially when you hit your teens years. So now you have to deal with this when you are a young adult, 18, 19, 20. If you do not, you're going to have a lot of problems later on, because now you're shifting from a point in your life where you are a child. Think of the American system of, if you're under 18, or maybe some places under 16, you are going to be a minor, right? You can't go to war, you can't drink, you can't smoke or buy cigarettes, right? Now you are all of a sudden given everything, right? You're 21, you can go buy some cigarettes now, you can go to the bar and drink, you can make a choice and get in the car and get in a crash or get pulled over and get a DUI. I mean, there's so many things that are now in your hand. What do you do about them? And the responsibility can be debilitating for some people, because they're like, oh my God, now I need to focus, right? My life is in jeopardy, because if I make the wrong choice, what is going to be my future? So now they're starting to worry about things. Maybe they're like, okay, I'm just going to find a nice, safe 9-to-5 job. And that's what they do. They might not like the job, but they do it because they want to keep that livelihood of being safe and secure. But that can be a false facade that they are just living in, right? Because they might, again, not want to be a carpenter. They might not want to be a waitress, but that's what they are right now. And then their identity is like, well, I'm a waiter. No, I'm this and I'm that. But there's so much more possibilities for that individual. So what you have to do if you want to transform is you have to get rid of everything you have learned. Essentially, you start from zero. You start from scratch. I don't know if anyone has ever tasted the difference. If you ever made pancakes or waffles or something, right, from a box, and you just mix it together, it might taste good, right? Not saying it's bad. But if you made it from scratch and you tweak the recipe to your liking, right? I'll put a little bit more salt, a little bit more sugar, maybe a little bit less flour. You make something that's exactly what your palate loves. And that is life. If you can say, I'm going to make this mixture, I'm not going to just buy it from a box and get it from a shelf. And so many people, they do that readily every single day. You have to do the work to figure out what works. And guess what? It's not going to be good the first time. It might not be good the second time, but third time, maybe it's getting better, right? You learn from your past mistakes and you get better. But yet, it doesn't happen if you're not willing to try and you're not going to be brave enough to fail. We have to have that failure be those stepping stones to the destination. And many people are always worried about being this perfect figure where everything must be ideal. And it's not about ideal. It's about understanding that life is going to fluctuate, the good and the bad. We need both. Because if you didn't have the bad in the life, you would not appreciate the good. Because right now you might be a healthy individual. You might have no common cold. You might be, living life. You might have a full belly. But guess what? The moment your belly is not full, the moment you have a common cold and you're coughing and you're sneezing or you have an upset stomach, it's the end of the world. Yeah, right now you have a moment to say, you know what, things are good, to check in. And maybe things are not good, right? Maybe your financial situation is not good. Maybe your relationship situation is not good. Something in your life you would like to change. Then why not change it? So we just have, these labels, as you said, that we give ourselves, and we have to be able to relinquish those labels, to throw them away and to give ourselves a better identity. Right. And you said, belief is the tippy top of the pyramid, right? What do we believe? Or actually identity is the top of the pyramid. Beliefs come fourth to that. And, many people are still living, with the knowledge of what the world is because there's so much intake today. There's so much stimulus that it's coming in at a rapid rate. And, I wanted to talk to you about the aspect of like just general photography, because there's so much going on. And the reason why I say this is because I think of the movie The Peaceful Warrior, where Dan Millman, he's an Olympic guy, he gets a mentor, and basically they go to a park one day and he's like, what are we doing here at this park? And the mentor just wanted him to look around, right? Like, what's going on? And in the beginning, he couldn't see it. He's like, I don't know what's going on. Then eventually he paid attention. He saw the trees, the birds, the dogs, the people, right? The weather was sunny, like many people, they just kind of are passive, right? You go outside, oh, I feel hot. Let me go in my car. Let me put on the AC. Or, oh, I'm cold. Let me put on some clothes and stuff like that. Like, we don't embrace what we're feeling, and we don't even embrace what we're seeing. So photography might not be so much about what you feel physically, but definitely when we look at a photo or a piece of art, it's going to say so much more. How does that affect the mind?
I'd love to tell you about a technique to ground yourself, like what that guy's mentor was saying. And I wonder if I'm sure you've heard of the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Have you ever heard of that? So I say in the book, if you're ever, desperate and you start to feel like you're about to harm yourself, dial 988, get on that suicide hotline. I know I did, and maybe it saved my life. There were some times where I've called them multiple times when I just I can't bother another family member. I can't go, or it's in the middle of the night or whatever. It's been a long time since I've done that, but I do remember this one time in particular. It was after I'd moved here to Colorado, and I had pulled my truck over and I was just facing this kind of ditch and some trees. And I called that number and I was just out of my mind, so sad and despondent. And she took me through the 5-4-3-2-1, and it impacted me so much that I included it in the book. So it's just, you just get centered and say, okay, name 5 things you can see. Michael, creek, snow, shirts, and glass. And then 4 things you can hear, and on down. So it's the see, feel, hear, smell, taste. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That process that takes 30 seconds to do or a minute to do, that's what is called dropping into our bodies. getting into our senses rather than our mind that's deceiving us at that moment. So that grounding, the book is really abundant with those very, very practical tools. That's what I learned so much in DBT that I wasn't learning in counseling. You'd asked me earlier about the tools. What are the tools? I was like, give it to me. I'm an assignments person. I'll do it. Just give me the tools. And they were things that were it was hard work because it wasn't just me sitting around talking. I had to take action. And sometimes the action may be, if I'm so dysregulated that I can't even do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, maybe I'm filling a bowl full of ice and water and sticking my face in a bowl of ice water. Those kind of tactical things are when people are really struggling with going into a negative thought spiral, and people are really traumatized, by it's thought. Thought is just driving all of it. And I would say that there are spirits that are driving that too, but you have to escape that by action. And so whoever is listening to this, if you're really struggling, if you get to a point where you think you cannot possibly accept something, much less take action, you can. So the genesis of the book and how photography fits in was born out of that. I started to realize, hey, I can take opposite to action emotion. These emotions are not steering me in the right direction. I can act opposite to that. So when I was in Austin, I had recently moved there, and I lived there for a period of about 4 or 5 years. And I recently moved there, and I was really ramping up my photography as a professional photographer. And so what I would do I would go downtown and with just like 6th Street, basically during the day. People are used to go to 6th Street partying down at night, but during the day, it ain't as cool and it ain't as pretty and it ain't as glitzy during the day, right? So I'd go down there and I'd just approach people in the street. If it was somebody living on the street, I may, here I had my professional camera like this. I was walking, hey, brother, how's it going? My name's Joe, professional photographer in town. I like to come down here and practice taking people's portraits. Would you spend just a few short minutes with me? I had I don't have a lot of money, but I've got $5 that I can spare. Sure, right? So meanwhile, I was recording, I had a GoPro on top of the camera. So I was recording these interactions. And so then I'd start working with them, okay, let's squat down. Let's do this. Let's do that. Okay, turn. I like that light there. And I mean, they're getting the full deal by a portrait photographer. And then I would turn these videos and, I sort of built up a YouTube channel and a following on these street portraits that I did. And at the end of that time in Austin, I actually had an exhibit, and the proceeds for that went to a local homeless shelter. But the quantum shift in my mindset when I did that, Michael, I realized I was tapping into something. This wasn't just Joe out on his hobby. I was tapping into something very, very real, very spiritual. Just that combined probably a half a dozen thing. One, it got my butt off the couch and out there in action, in the sunshine, in the whatever. Two, I was feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I mean, you know what it takes to walk up to a stranger in the street, and ask him to do a little portrait session. So there was that. But then just me being out there with people who are suffering so much, man, just suffering. And there's something about that that can be just so powerful. God wired us this way. This interaction here, common identities and talking through things like this is the way we were wired to interact with each other. So I would get back to my car and I can't tell you how many times I'd get back to my car and I would just break down and sob. But they were tears really of joy and tears of catharsis, I was just so in that flow, so grateful to God that I had taken that action. And then, then it's all the editing and everything that I did to create that, 6-minute video that I spent 20 hours on or whatever, and putting myself out there and then getting interaction from people. I was getting in the game. And there's no way to overcome this without getting in the game. You got to find that thing. And, we all hear know your truth and be yourself and be your true, authentic self. And, um, all good. Of course. I mean, there's an aspect that we have to do that. But rather than, I found that can also take me down to some lonely roads, because if I just ask about Joe's will, then all of a sudden I'm getting a lot of messages that are really murky, and they're so blended in with my ego and my labels and what I want out of life, what was modeled to me as a child. It's pretty murky. But if I have a relationship with God, and if I'm able to still my mind, be still, and know that I am God, if I have that and I'm able to create that stillness and sort of just say, okay, here's my list. You know what, Lord, close this. What is your will for me? What do you want me to do? Like asking our higher power, if we have that relationship that we cultivate like a living, eating, breathing, like the old hymn says, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. If you have that conversational relationship with a living higher power, that's the voice I want to follow, because I'm just so filled with poison and terrible mindset. And this is bad for me affirming these things. I know that we should, speaking that, but just so people understand, this is a universal thing. We all feel, we all go so dark. We all get so judgmental. We all have our identities, and there's a way out of that. There's a way to escape that trap, and it's stillness. We have to be able to sit with those things and let them ride, like clouds going overhead or leaves on a stream. We have to let those pass and say, okay, noted, but I know there's something deeper here. I know there's something deeper here. And we hear about that still small voice. That's when you start to hear that still small voice. It ain't Joe just talking to himself. There's like, I really felt, Lord, that's just what I'm hearing you saying, is that, testing that. And the answer is yes. And doing that and taking action. Yeah, it, talks in the Bible about, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, who gives it bountifully. But whatever you do, man, you better believe and not doubt. Because if you doubt, watch out. You're just like, maybe whatever it says, the twigs or something, thrown into a fire. Because we're just useless if we don't, not useless, but if we don't take action on what we're hearing, then we're not getting to demonstrate that power and act on a power that's greater than ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, very true. And for the people who are afraid to demonstrate that power, like they have to take that leap of faith, essentially, right? They have to even get quiet, and truly listen to what's going on. You hinted at this in the beginning, where you said, people, they don't want to know what's really going on inside of them. Like they don't want to check in, right? They don't want to see the darkness. They don't want to see the bad mindsets. They don't want to see all the problems they have. They would rather sweep them under the rug. They would say, you know what, maybe another day. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month. I'll do it next year. And before they know it, right, either things have gotten so bad they have no choice to pay attention, or time has run out. And right now, if you're listening to this, the wonderful thing about what we can do today is that we have time. We have time to make some adjustments and to make some changes for the people who want to do that, right? But typically people will wait. People wait until things are really bad, right? People don't just say, hey, my life can be better. Let me make it better, right? There's a small portion of people who will do that. But most people, they wait for that rock bottom. They wait for that bad day. And then they start to pay attention. When every single day you should check in. There's tools for that. Journaling is one, right? You can read books. Doesn't matter what book, right? You just look for information to help sway your thinking. And the information doesn't even have to be something that's a word. It could be looking at a picture. It could be looking at scenery. Seeing birds just kind of flying together, free and playing. You're like, whoa, that could be me, right? You're seeing people walking together, talking, maybe smiling, holding hands, if that could be me, right? There's always a possibility if you have life. And many people, they fail to see the possibilities when they are riddled with limits and all these negative beliefs and thoughts and all these bad circumstances that might be them right now. It's not permanent, right? We have to understand that. And for the individuals who are just not taking the appropriate action today, what's one thing you can do today that's going to be more than you did the day or the week before, right? Because maybe you come home out of, from work and you're so tired, right? There's no time in the day, right? Well, can you go outside and maybe take your smartphone and snap a picture and see what you see? Can you walk around the block and feel what is, it's feeling outside? Maybe it's hot, maybe it's cold, maybe you saw something that you wouldn't have saw or seen before. And that is where life can truly begin. It's about doing the things that are going to be different than your norm. Because we all have a normal day. We all have a routine. How can you disrupt that routine routinely? And then you can start to really see what's going on. It could be just changing it up, so minute. Going to the gym different days. Maybe you go to gym Monday through Friday. Heck, skip Friday, go Saturday, right? It's going to throw you for a loop. You're like, whoa, this is insane. It's the smallest things that can make the biggest difference.
I just like that because, quitting, I learned that quitting is a really hard habit to break. When we start quitting, when we start putting thing after thing on the shelf, which is what I did 5 years ago with the Mindful Photography Field Guide, I had this idea for this therapeutic curriculum and I put it on the shelf and I suffered as a result. Those things that we put on the shelf, those things are not going to let us go. If it's truly God's plan for us, they ain't going to let us go. They're going to sort of torture us until we turn and face and go, maybe that means that's God's will, because it keeps coming up over and over again. The technique, so that again, the book is super practical. There are 15 smartphone photography practices for inner peace. So each one of them is really self-contained. There are 5 different sections of the book, and you're going to learn a ton of mindful photography techniques too with our smartphone. So the first thing that happens in the practice is a mindful photography practice can be, hey, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to go climb a mountain and I'm going to do the, face towards the sunshine practice out of this book, and you go do that. But really, the main purpose of these is for their interventionary techniques. So I'm going through my day and I start to get dysregulated and I start to get angry, upset, whatever. And I feel like those walls closing in. So what helps me, hand on the heart, like first you have to, when you want to get into a mindful state versus a thinking state, you have to intervene. You have to realize, oh my gosh, I'm just completely lost in thought. And you kind of have to know what that even means. Lost in thinking or being. So I think there are a lot of people who have never even experienced the kind of presence that I'm talking about. The gap between words. The stillness when I'm not trying to exert anything on my life, but I'm just being. That, to know the difference between those two is very revolutionary. So again, I'm out in the wild, something's happened at work, that person ticked me off again. My gosh, I'm starting to feel, whoom, hand on the heart, 3 belly breaths. Sort of like a mama patting a baby's back. You're self-soothing. Hand on your heart. You're connecting. There's this loop. I'm connecting to my heart. Force air down into those lungs. Suck that air down into those lungs. You don't have to look good. You don't have to look mindful. I mean, hand on the heart, 3 belly breaths. Okay, now I know I'm not spiraled. So many times I'll close my eyes when I go into those thought spirals. No, my eyes are open. I'm aware. I'm in my body. And this can be when I'm going, oh boy, that may be mama's really, really soothing the baby. Baby needs it. That means I'm pretty dysregulated. Or it may be nope, not going to go there again. 3 deep breaths, boom. So you do that and decide, okay, I'm going to do a quick practice here. First thing you do, slip the world's greatest distraction device, into airplane mode. Turn it on to airplane mode. That's the intentionality. That says, I mean business here. I'm not going to go onto X or Facebook or YouTube or anything. I'm not going to go look at my affirmations. No, I'm going to do this practice right now. And I'm turning the noisemaker off for that. So otherwise, it's not mindful photography. If I'm out with my smartphone, it'd be one thing if I were with a camera or something. But if I'm out with my smartphone, it ain't mindful photography that if the phone is not on airplane. And you know the difference, because when you do that, it's like, man, I'm waiting for a call from, Aunt Bessie. I'm waiting for this. I may get no, then we're double-minded. That's a double-minded thing. So then doing the practice. So it's hand on your heart and 3 belly breaths. So that's something that anybody can try today and see, what's that? What's Joe's talking about? What's the use in that? But that's the way to, quote, drop into the body. So that's each practice has this focus, capture, shine technique. So 1, focusing on body and surroundings. Hand on the bed, hand on my heart, 3 belly breaths, open my eyes, boom, okay, I'm present. And then 2 is capture the present moment. It's not going out and just taking a bunch of pretty pictures that I'm going to post on social. If no social media involved. What we do with our photographs in mindful photography, we don't post them on social. Because the second you do that, you're looking for that validation. And that's not what this is about. This is about blessing others. So depression and anxiety, this is a disease of isolation. And so the third part of it after we capture the present moment is shine our light and bless someone. So, like from the scripture, the shining light on the hill, we don't take a lamp on our bedside and put a bowl over it. We let that light shine for all people to see. So we're going to shine our light and bless others. That's how we get there, is getting out of that self-centered mindset that we're in. I mean, back to the child metaphor, that's all a child wants. They can't think of anything other than their immediate needs. And that's what I revert into when I start to get dysregulated. We get intensely self-centered. Protection, I'm not saying it's a moral defect. It's for self-protection. But the shine thing of taking those, I go out and I do, chase things that sparkle, and I capture a few great shots of some sparkly things, and then I edit them and clean them up a little bit. And I'm going, my son, Caleb, or my brother John, or, yesterday I saw Wendy, and man, I could tell she was really struggling. Okay, I'm going to take those 3, start a new text message. Wendy, I just want you to know, sister, you are a child of God. And you're such a blessing to me. I know you were struggling yesterday, but I don't think I'll tell you enough of what a blessing you are in my life. When we do that, it is like, just me even saying those words, I'm getting goosebumps. That's the power of love. Up in the mountains, we have all these creeks and everything all over the place. And if I lived down here on this creek, saying back in the frontier days, and that creek stopped flowing, I'd go, okay, I got to check this out. And there may be a beaver dam that's created up. Well, I got to get rid of that beaver dam for it to flow. Otherwise, we're going to have these pools of stagnant water. And that's what it's like in this mental health world, is we cannot stagnate with that water, those same messages. We've got to open that up for it to flow. And that's what eternal love is all about. And that's the magic. It's whether it's a 12-step program or a church or whatever, at the end of it, it's always serving others like you're doing right now.
It's so important that we take, like all of the things we learned today and we begin to apply them. And I don't want you to think you have to apply them all at once, because we talked a lot. We gave a lot of information to people today, and I want you just to choose, handful of things. Maybe, it could be even one today, and you try it out. Maybe you love it. Maybe you don't, right? Try the next thing, right? Figure out what works for you. We're all going to be different. We're going to gravitate toward things. There's a reason why they have different equipment in the gym. There's a reason why they have different types of food in the world, right? Because maybe today you want Chinese food and tomorrow you want Indian, right? And you're not forced to just have one type of thing. And that's life, right? We can have so many different types of things. There's so many different types of pictures you can take, for example, right? You could take a picture of the sky, you could take a picture of the ground, take a picture of a tree, you could take a picture of an animal, you could take a picture of a car, you could take a picture of yourself, right? And right now, look at yourself, right? Make it a still and see, what do you see? Not so much of the surface level. Don't talk about, oh my God, my hair is a mess today. God, I got bags under my eye. Oh my God, my shirt is wrinkled. I mean, we could talk about that all day, right? Who do you think you are in that picture? Truly. Are you confident? Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Are you anxious? Are you fearful? Depending, right? It depends on where you are. But just because you're there doesn't mean you have to stay there, as I said earlier. And I think we had a wonderful conversation, Joe. And what I love to do at the end is for guests to, please share where people can reach out, purchase the guide, the book, and then of course, please share with us the takeaway that everyone can walk in their day with.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Michael. First of all, I'd love for people to go to mindfulphotography.org and download the free Chase Things That Sparkle practice. It's so simple. And you can also just take that smartphone of yours right after you finish this podcast and turn it on airplane mode and go take a photo. Get outside, get out from underneath the roof, the ceiling that you're under right now. Get outside under the sun and go just take some photographs of things that sparkle. If you're with your dog, it may be your eye and the highlight of the dog's eye. It may be you see a piece of glass over there and you take a shot of that. Just capture a few shots of things that sparkle. Then just take a moment, edit them down, and send them off to somebody that you love. Send somebody a love note. Say, I was thinking about you. And most importantly, I want people to feel, back on that check-in, feel what that's like to have that energy flow through you and to be present and not think about your problems or look too deeply, but just mechanically go do this. You're going to be combining with love and creativity, and that's going to be huge. I'd also love for people to really know, especially people who struggle with really dark thoughts and struggle with suicidal ideations and self-harm, that you're not alone. You're not alone. And this guy right here that you see struggled with that so desperately. Every imaginable kind of psychiatric remedy I tried, even spiritual remedies I tried. But I learned a little bit about meditation, started combining that with the thing I love the most, photography. That started 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago. I took the idea back off the shelf. I found me a writing coach to help me with a book. And 6 months ago, I published it. And she said the most evil thing to me. She's like, okay, now the hard part starts. It's like, what? I've written this book now. And sure enough, I'm putting myself out there. But I just told you folks, I was a little nervous before this thing, but I showed up anyway. So that could be you too. And if any of this helps you, just imagine if I had acted on any of that. So you have a gift. God knitted you together in your mother's womb. All the days of your life were written in his book before any of them came to be. You have a mission, and you don't get off that easy. It's time for you to pursue that mission. Get in the right mindset. Form a real personal relationship with God. Make that the most important thing you do in your life, is to have a conversational being relationship with God. And the rest of it is going to take care of itself.
And how can people find you?
JoeVanWyk.com or mindfulphotography.org. So I'm Joe Van Wyk, and I'm at JoeVanWyk on all social media.
Of course, I make it easy for everyone. All the links and all the socials are just right down below. So make sure to check him out, check out what he's doing, follow him on social so you can see and continue to be involved in his work and his journey in life. Because as we were talking about today, the journey is going to have many intervals, going to have ups and downs, good moments and bad. And we should learn to embrace them all, because when we do, we can truly, in a sense, really see the beauty of life. So I do want to thank you, Joe, for coming on, spending some time with us, and talking about and sharing your book today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really enjoyed it.